Welcome to Computer Stream. We are seeing a series of lectures in the subject Agile Methodologies. We will be seeing a topic on extreme programming. In extreme programming, we will be seeing the roles and values of extreme programming. This will be a continuation of the previous session. In today's session, the contents will be the XP techniques. We will be seeing about the extreme programming release cycle, extreme programming roles, extreme programming values, extreme programming scope, and the extreme programming work products. In the previous session, we have seen about what an extreme programming is about and who was the founder of extreme programming. I suppose you might be remembering the founder of extreme programming was said to be Ken Beck, and apart from this, we saw about the workflow of the extreme programming, or you can even call it as the life cycle of the extreme programming, or you can even call it as the architecture of the extreme programming, which we have seen in the previous session. Apart from that, we saw techniques that were used in extreme programming. The major technique that was used in extreme programming was the pair programming, refactoring. So we will be continuing with those topics, and we will be seeing the continuation of extreme programming, and we will be seeing the roles, responsibilities, and the values of this extreme programming. So my dear students, extreme programming is one of the methodology followed in the Agile software development. Here as a scratch, we will be seeing extreme programming is shortly called as XP, and here the E is silent, so X has to be put in the capital and P is to be in the capital, so it has been shortly called as XP. So let us see the XP techniques. So as far as XP techniques are concerned, we have three important techniques that is to be noted upon. One is pair programming, second one is test first programming, third one is refactoring. Now let us see what a pair programming is about. A pair programming, a style of programming in which two programmers work side by side at one computer, thereby continuously collaborating on the same design and logic of code. Then what does it mean? So you have a same system. In the same system, two people will be sitting parallel to each other or will be sitting apart. So what they will do is, one programmer, he will be doing the coding part. The other programmer, the other guy, he will be testing whatever the coder is doing. And so what is the result? Here the test is being done immediately so that the defects are eliminated at a faster pace. Then at the second instance, the person who was a tester earlier, he will start doing coding, and the person who was a coder earlier, he will start the testing. So what is the difference that you have found from the traditional life cycle models? In a traditional life cycle model, you have a separate development team, you have a separate tester team, wherein here in extreme programming, which is one of the methodology of Agile software development, here both the developer and the tester are one and the same. They will be doing, both people will be doing the same task, and they will be taking their own means, and they will be processing at one instance of time. A person, he will be a developer. At the different instance of time, the same person, he will be a tester. Now what is the second technique that is to be taken care of in extreme programming techniques? Second one is said to be test first programming. My dear students, I suppose you would have studied about testing as far as in the subject called software engineering in your earlier semesters. Here and you might be knowing about the unit testing, integration testing, system testing, so on and so forth. So here in test first programming, the modules are unit tested. So the system is tested as it is built instead of waiting until the end of the development to be tested. Usually in a traditional method, what we do, we complete the development part. After completing the development part, we go in for the testing. But here the system is tested as it is built instead of waiting until the end of development to test. Okay. What is the third technique? That is called as refactoring. What do you mean by refactoring? It is nothing but the simplification of design of the existing code without changing its behavior. Okay. What is a behavioral testing? Again, my dear students, you would have studied this in your software engineering. Which type of testing you call it as a behavioral test? The black box testing is said to be a behavioral test, wherein we will not be seeing the internal structure of the code and we will be seeing only the behavior of the code. So similarly here, even if you change the design of the software or the design of the existing code, the software behavior should not get changed. The code can be ratified, the code can be revamped, but the working style of the software should not get changed. That is called as refactoring. So these three techniques are pretty important as far as this methodology, as far as this extreme programming methodology is concerned. Then let us see about the extreme programming release cycle. Unlike your traditional life cycle model, we have the planning phase, we have the design phase, we have the implementation phase, and we have the testing phase. Now let us see when the project starts, right? There you have the ADCT. ADCT was said to be analysis, design, coding, testing. But here, for each and every release, I suppose you know what a release is because we have seen this in the previous session, as extreme programming does small releases. So for each and every release, we have a planning phase, design, implementation, and testing. So let us see in this diagrammatic view. Here, when the project starts, you have a planning phase. In the planning phase, you have to select user stories. I suppose you might be knowing what a user story is. So how to select a user story? Who writes the user stories? So these things we have seen in the previous session itself. So we have to give the feature values, and then we have to give the acceptance criteria from the customer. And then now let us see about the XP release cycle. So unlike the other traditional life cycle models, in the XP release cycle also we will be having the planning, design, implementation, and the testing phases. My dear students, in the previous session we saw about small releases. In your traditional life cycle model, you do that ADCT, analysis, design, coding, testing, but here in XP model, for each and every release we have a planning, we have design, we have implementation, and we have the testing. So let us see this diagram, this release cycle in detail. So here when the project starts, we need to select the user stories. My dear students, you know how to select a user story. I suppose you might be knowing who writes the user story, what is the advantage of having a user story, because these things we have seen it in the previous session itself. So after writing the user story, you need to select the user story, you need to select the features that you are going to develop. So those features you are supposed to select, and then you need to select the acceptance criteria which you have received from the customer end, and then you need to have an iteration planning. So based on this, so all these four components will come under this planning of this XP release cycle. And after planning, we go to the second step called as design. Here we are supposed to keep it simple. It is also shortly called as KISS design. So keep it simple, and you have the what you are going to keep it simple, the spike solutions. What is a spike solution? In the previous session, in the architecture, we had an architectural spike due to uncertain estimates, due to certain things we may not be aware of the happenings. So because of the uncertainty, the design may change, it may result in an architectural spike. So we are supposed to keep those spikes simple. So it is called as keep it simple spike solutions. That is only shortly called as KISS solution for tricky problems. And then we are supposed to refactor it. My dear students, what is refactoring? Refactoring is, even if you are going to change the design, even if you are going to change the coding style, the working behavior of the software should not get changed. So here in design you are doing the refactoring. Okay, now you have completed the planning phase, design phase. Then what is the third phase? Since I am going pretty fast because you knew this, you would have studied this in your software engineering itself as well. You might be knowing the life cycle models. So after design we have the implementation phase. In implementation phase, what do? We do a unit test planning. Unit test planning. We have the pair programming for each story. That means for each and every story, two people will be sitting together and two programmers will be sitting together and they will be doing it. That is called as pair programming. So you perform the pair programming for each story. Then based on the unit test plan that you have with you, you do the unit test and you integrate it pretty often. That is the speciality of an agile methodology. So you do continuous integration. So all these four things you do it in the implementation phase. Then we move on to the testing. Already in the implementation phase we have done that unit testing. So what we are going to do in the testing phase? We are going to do the regression testing after each change. What do you mean by regression testing? We have a top down testing, bottom up testing. So we do regression testing, testing repeatedly a same set of activity after making each and every change. We call it as regression testing. Then we have the test refactoring. Then we have integration testing and validation testing, which is to be performed by the users, because the user has to perform the validation testing. We as a tester, we will be doing integration testing, and after integrating all the sub modules and making it into a bigger module and testing the module, we give it to the user for validating. So the user does the validation testing. Okay, fine. Now the testing phase gets completed. Then what is to be done? We go in for a released increment. So here after testing we move on to the released increment. So this is what we do in each and every XP release cycle. This has been performed for each and every small releases that we take into consideration. Then next is about the extreme programming roles. My dear students, who is a stakeholder? Anyone who is part of this software project development, anyone who is part of this particular project is said to be the stakeholder. So now a programmer is also a stakeholder. So the programmers write the code. The customers is also a stakeholder. Customer write the stories, functional tests and sets implementation priority. What does it mean? The customer, he will be writing some 10 to 15 stories in which he needs to prioritize and he needs to state which user story has to be taken up first for the releases. So the customer writes the stories, he does functional test and he sets the implementation priority. The tester, okay, do you think that all the customers he knows how to do functional test and how to implement or how to set the priority? No, not all customers knew this. So here in XP the testers help the customers to write the functional test and runs the functional test and maintains it using the testing tools. So we will be seeing elaborately about the testing tool in a different session. So he maintains it using the testing tools. Then the tracker. Who is a tracker? A person who monitors. The tracker gives feedback on accuracy of the estimates and traces the progress of iterations. The coach. Who is a coach? Agile coach. An agile coach is also called as an XP coach. In Scrum we would have seen a topic on Scrum. In Scrum, how is the coach called as? In Scrum framework, the coach is called as a Scrum Master, whereas in extreme programming, the coach is called as an XP coach or an Agile coach. So this Agile coach, he guides the team to follow the XP processes. A consultant will be an external member who guides the team to solve the problems, and the manager is a person who helps to make decisions and who follows them up in practice. So these are some of the XP roles. Now we will be seeing the roles and the responsibilities associated for each and every role and the required competence. So these roles are pretty important as far as any type of examination is concerned. So anywhere and everywhere, as far as XP is concerned, people will be asking about the roles and the required competence. So the first role is said to be the coach, which is also called as an Agile coach or XP coach. Coach is also called as Agile coach or an XP coach. An XP coach is a person responsible for the process as a whole, guiding the team and understanding the process and learning them from other XP teams. The second role is said to be the programmer. A programmer is a person who has good communication skills. This is pretty important. Who maintains simplicity in work and code. What do you mean by simplicity in work? Because they are going to give small releases. When they are going to do, okay, why does a programmer require communication, which is not mandatory as far as your traditional methodology is concerned, but in Agile methodology we require communication. Why is it so? Because here in extreme programming, the important technique, XP technique that we saw was pair programming. When two people sit together, when they are going to work on the same logic, then both these people have to communicate among themselves. So for which communication is mandatory. So here a programmer is a person with good communication skills who maintains simplicity in work and code. Then the third one is said to be the customer, or they can be also a customer representative. What do you mean by customer representative? Customer representative, why do we have a customer representative rather than a customer? Because in all projects we cannot expect the customer to sit along with the development team throughout the execution of the project. So what does the customer do is, he assigns or he identifies a person to be his own representative, and then that customer representative, he will be an integral part of the team. So here that is said to be a role. A customer is a person from a customer organization, is a person from the customer organization, which means he may be a representative who is integral part of the XP team. Then a tester. A tester is a person who helps the customer write the functional test. As I said, not all customers will be knowing how to write the functional test. So a tester will be assisting the customer to write the functional test, and he will be responsible for running it regularly and post results for everyone's knowledge. Then project sponsor, who is said to be a vital person because he is the person who is going to give money. So a person responsible for checking the team's progress regularly and communicate with the team to listen to the issues, so that when they are going to give out small releases, he has to find out what is the issue that is there and whether those issues have been resolved and whether it is going in track. So these are some of the responsibilities associated in each role and the competence level. Next is, we will be seeing the XP practices. As far as the XP practices is concerned, it should have a simple design, it should have a test driven development, TDD, test driven development, refactoring, it should have a continuous integration, we need to do continuous integration, there should be pair programming, it should follow a certain coding standard, then only whomsoever is going to occupy your seat in the near future will be in a position to take up the coding that you have done. And the next set of XP practices is collective code ownership. What does it mean? If the project is successful, the success does not rely on an individual person, it relies on the team. It is a team success. If the project becomes a failure, it is not an individual failure, it is a team's failure. So This collective ownership is as well called and is one of the XP practices. Then system metaphor. System metaphor, this is a terminology that is used in XP wherein we do not follow the traditional methodology and we take up a few things and we follow it in this agile in this XP, and because we follow whatever we have followed in the traditional methodology, we implement it over here and we make use of it for smaller releases. So that is called a system metaphor. And 40 hours per week, what does this mean? Do you mean to say that you need to work for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, so 8 into 5 becomes 40? Okay, that may be the case. Or else the other cases, in one of the days you can work for 2 hours or 3 hours, the other day you can work for 12 hours. You need to see to that per week you are completing 40 hours. So 40 hours per week. Next is the sustainable pace. Sustainable pace denotes whatever you do, it should be on a pace, and whatever you do after small releases, the agile coach, they will try to motivate the programmers and they will try to freshen up the programmer's mind, so that the programmer, he will be making small releases on a sustainable pace. So these are some of the XP practices. Now let us see the values, XP values which are followed during XP practices. This is one other important question unlike your XP roles. So as far as the XP values are concerned, you have values such as the communication and respect. So XP requires honest communication and close collaboration between all members of the team. So here in XP, as we said, one of the point was collective code ownership, which means, and one of the point was the programmer need to have a good communication skill, which means everything, whatever the success or a failure in a project, it's all happened on a collaborative means. So when we have a close collaboration between all members of a team, then that becomes a value. That value is said to be communication and respect. We have 4 values in XP to be followed. The first value is communication and respect. Second value is simplicity. As far as simplicity is concerned, the team should concentrate on simple things rather than spending too much time on effort on complicated things that may never be used at a later stage. Then the third value is said to be feedback. The programmers get the feedback of their code. How do they get? Through unit testing. Through unit testing. The customers receive feedback from programmers through the completion of user stories. Customers provide feedback to the team through their reviews. So the fourth value is said to be courage. It requires courage to address the issues. Supposing if you have made anything wrong, you are supposed to say to the agile coach that, sir, this is what I have made, this mistake I have made, I have committed, I will try to resolve it. You are supposed to address the issues and you are supposed to fix the problems and throw away code in favor of alternative better designs and implementations. So my dear students, these 4 XP values are highly important, that is to be followed during the XP practices. Then we have the XP scope. This XP, extreme programming, is best suited for projects that require co-located teams of small to medium size. Typically, what will be the size of the project? It will be 3 to 10. XP is meant for projects where there are unstable and unpredictable requirements, where the requirements are not clearly known, where the requirements are not available. So due to this unpredictable requirements, we go in for this extreme programming. Then let us see the extreme programming work products. As a small releases, the working code for each small release or increment. You need to, in each and every small release, you are supposed to deliver an MMF. What is MMF? Minimum marketable feature. And you are supposed to do continuous joint learning process through pair programming, because when 2 people are going to work on the same logic of code, then both will be in a position to learn things. So it is a joint learning process. Then let us summarize this session. What are things we saw? We saw about the XP, extreme programming techniques. We saw about extreme programming release cycle. We saw about the roles of extreme programming. We saw about the values of extreme programming. We saw about the scope available for extreme programming. We saw about the competence level of each role associated in extreme programming, and we saw some of the extreme programming work products. Thank you for watching. Thank you.